Greetings, everyone. My name is Dina, and I welcome you today to a video that will talk to you about the Economic Freedom Index. Economic freedom is not only buying and selling stuff, but also being able to travel where you want, having absolutely no problem, to say the things you want to say, also having no problem, as well as anything that has to do with interaction with others. All that is basically at the core of economic freedom. The Index of Economic Freedom is an annual index and ranking created in the year 1995 by the Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal to measure the degree of economic freedom in the world's nations. For 45 years, the Heritage Foundation has been dedicated to building freedom, opportunity, prosperity, and civil society. For thousands of years, the vast majority of people were lacking economic freedom, as well as opportunity. As a result, people were living in a dehumanizing life of poverty and sickness that can lead to death. Thankfully, during our current time, people are far more better off than any previous time in human history. There are still, on the other hand, countries with nations in very bad situations, and all this will be mentioned to you as I go along this video. This index, year after year, demonstrates the powerful relationship between economic freedom and prosperity. More economic freedom means better economic performance, rising income, full employment, monetary stability, but all these, as you know, are means to an end. So what is economic freedom? How do we define economic freedom by the book? Economic freedom is the fundamental right of every single human being. It's your right, it's my right, to control our own labor and property. In an economically free society, individuals are free to work, produce, consume, as well as invest in any way they please. In an economically free society, governments allow labor, capital, as well as goods to move freely, so free markets, free trade, and private property under free enterprise. So yes, the economic freedom is associated with many of the things we think of when we think of a healthy society. Moving on to which countries fund this exercise. Which countries fund the Economic Freedom Index? As I mentioned earlier, the Economic Freedom Index was created by the Heritage Foundation in partnership with Wall Street Journal, which are both American companies, plus the Canadian think tank Institute Fraser. And we all know that America and Canada are two of the most powerful countries in the world. There are some issues that come across this exercise and need to be considered when trying to decide on the extent of economic freedom countries. Countries that achieve higher levels of economic freedom consistently outperform others in economic growth, long-term prosperity, and social progress. Those with lower economic freedom, on the other hand, risk economic stagnation, high unemployment, and deteriorating social conditions. Here, as you can see, are a few issues, bulletin points mentioned in front of you. First problem is subjectivity problem and institutional shortcomings. Some regulations and state interventions are hidden and not made public, and this does not allow them completely understand the true meaning of economic freedom. 2. Problem of non-consistent division. Individual freedom deals with whether freedom pertains exclusively to an individual, while collective freedom deals with whether freedom can relate to a community as a whole. 3. Problem of choice. Most of the differences in policy conclusions usually depends largely on the choice of economic freedom indicator. And lastly, the fourth problem of aggregation. It is difficult to give a vague explanation as to whether or not economic freedom is important for growth, and the result usually depends upon the method of aggregation. As you can see, we move to the country ranking. Most economically free countries have GDPs per capita about 10 times more in the size of less economically free countries. It is tend to be that big countries would be more economically free and have larger GDP per capita than smaller ones. However, the poor countries that have big economic freedom have GDPs that are 15% greater than the poor countries that are less economically free. The argument here is that GDP per capita only measures average income, but if we examine inequality measures, we find that countries that are more economically free also have more upward income distributions. That is, economic freedom isn't only associated with higher income levels on average, but also with income distributions. Here, the heat map shows more clearly with colors, showing in green free countries such as the United States and Canada, and oppositely in red least economic free countries such as Ukraine. Scrolling down, the graph shows Hong Kong with an index of economic freedom 90.2 and North Korea with a low score of 5.9, making it the least free of the 180 economies measured in the 2019 index, which is the current year. Moving forward, gathering data on economic freedom depends mostly on 4 points, as you can see on the video. First point is the rule of law. Rule of law is the degree of legal property protection. Second point is the government size, which is very important as the government analyzes marginal taxes and income. Third point mentioned is the regulatory efficiency, which is also very important, where the government controls business freedom. And lastly, the open market, which is more or less like free trade nationally as well as internationally. Lastly, I'll be mentioning the goal of economic freedom and its effects and how it's affecting our lives. Main goal is to allow each member of the society to make their own choices. Supported decision making is a way people can make their own decision and stay in charge of their lives while receiving any help they need to do so. Economic freedom affects our lives in many ways. If government imposes additional costs on consumers and businesses through higher taxes, fees, and regulations, or restrict the fair use of our property, economic freedom falls. Economic freedom, which means free markets at home and free trade in the world, is essential to human liberty. Bottom line, the more economic freedom we have, the more able we are to make this world a better place. On a side note, as I was personally living in the United States of America for almost 10 years, I find it legit to mention that in the year 2000, the United States had second most free economy in the world. By 2008, America's ranking had fallen to 10th place. In 2012, economic freedom in America fell again to the 18th rank. So in your opinion, what do you think the solution of this should be? Thank you so much for watching. This video was a collaboration of 10 people. I'm your speaker, Dina, and I wish our video was productive and of benefit to all of you.